You know, when you live alone at an older age, you start to notice things that younger folks never even think about. The silence of the house, the way the seasons change through your window. How a single moment of carelessness can turn into a problem you never saw coming. Maybe you felt it too. One small slip on the bathroom floor, a forgotten bill, a misplaced key. And suddenly, you're reminded that living alone isn't just about peace and quiet. It's about being careful, about knowing what to avoid before trouble comes knocking at your door. I've seen too many people underestimate what it really means to grow older alone. Some think it's just about making it through the day, keeping yourself busy, finding small joys where you can. But the truth is, there are mistakes that can turn an independent, peaceful life into a stressful, even dangerous one. And I don't want that for you. That's why we need to talk about the things you must avoid when living alone as an older person. The first mistake people make is believing that small risks don't matter. They do. Every single one. That step you skipped, fixing because it's just a little loose. That's the step that might take you down one day. That rug you've had for years but never secured to the floor. It only takes one bad step to realize that it was a hazard waiting to happen. When you're young, you can afford to ignore the little things. A stumble here, a forgotten task there. It doesn't seem like much. But when you're older, the smallest inconvenience can become a real problem. And the worst part, people often don't realize it until it's too late. You see, living alone means you don't have the luxury of instant help. There's no one in the next room to come running if you fall. No one to remind you about that doctor's appointment you keep putting off. No one to double-check if you left the stove on. And that brings me to the second thing you should never do. Assume you can handle everything on your own. Now I know what you're thinking. I've been taking care of myself for years. I don't need anyone's help. And maybe that's true. Maybe you're strong, capable, and independent. But let me ask you this. When was the last time you had someone check in on you? Not just a polite phone call, but someone who really knows what's going on with you? Because the reality is, no matter how capable you are, isolation is a dangerous thing. It creeps in quietly, little by little, until one day you realize you haven't had a real conversation in weeks. Loneliness isn't just about feeling sad. It affects your health, your memory, even your lifespan. There's a saying, a person who avoids people is avoiding life itself. And I've seen this happen to too many older folks. They stop reaching out. They stop making plans. They start telling themselves, I don't want to bother anyone. But let me tell you something. People aren't bothered by you. They just assume you're doing fine because you never ask for anything. And that's the trap. You have to make an effort to stay connected, to let people in, even in small ways. Because once you isolate yourself, you start making decisions that aren't in your best interest. Speaking of decisions, there's another mistake that older people make when living alone, and it's one that can cost them everything: neglecting their finances. I know it's not a fun topic, but it's a necessary one. I can't tell you how many times I've seen good, decent people run into trouble simply because they weren't paying attention to where their money was going. Maybe they forgot to review a bill. Maybe they didn't notice an extra charge on their bank statement. Maybe they got a call from someone claiming to be a grandchild in trouble. And out of fear, they sent money without thinking twice. Scams, hidden fees, small financial mistakes. These things don't seem like much at first, but they add up. And the older you get, the more people assume you're an easy target. That's why you need to have a system. Whether it's setting up automatic payments, having a trusted person help you review your finances, or simply double-checking every transaction before you agree to anything. Don't assume everything is fine just because you've never had a problem before. The world changes fast, and the last thing you need is to wake up one day, realizing you've been taken advantage of. And that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about in this section: your health. I know, it's easy to ignore the little aches and pains, to brush them off as just part of getting older. But listen to me. Your health is everything, and living alone means you don't have anyone there to notice if something isn't right. That cough that won't go away, that sudden change in your appetite, that dizziness you felt the other day but ignored. These things matter. Your body is always trying to tell you something. The question is, are you listening? I've seen too many people put off doctor visits, ignore warning signs, and convince themselves they'll deal with it later. But later isn't always guaranteed. And when you live alone, you have to be your own best advocate. Schedule those checkups. Keep track of your medications. Don't wait until something becomes an emergency before you take it seriously. Because here's the truth. Living alone can be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life. It gives you freedom, independence, and a chance to live on your own terms. But only if you do it wisely. Only if you recognize the risks and take them seriously. And only if you remember that just because you're alone doesn't mean you have to be lonely. There's a saying that goes, "It's not the big things that get you, it's the little ones." And when you're living alone, that couldn't be more true. A missed step, a forgotten detail, a habit you never thought twice about. Those are the things that sneak up on you. And that's what we need to talk about now. The everyday choices that seem harmless, but can slowly, quietly work against you. One of the biggest mistakes older people make when living alone is neglecting their daily routine. Now, I don't mean just waking up at the same time or eating meals at a set hour, though that's important. I mean the simple, structured habits that keep your mind sharp and your body in motion. Because let me tell you, the moment you start drifting through your days without any sense of structure, that's when problems start creeping in. I've seen it happen so many times. People retire, their days become looser, and before they know it, their sleep schedule is all over the place. One night they stay up too late watching TV. Then the next day they wake up feeling groggy, skip breakfast, and by the afternoon, they feel too tired to go for their usual walk. It's a slow unraveling, and the worst part, it doesn't feel like a problem at first. You tell yourself, it's just one day. But one day turns into two turns into a week. And before you know it, you're moving less, eating irregularly, and spending more time sitting than doing anything else. You see, routine isn't just about discipline. It's about survival. It's what keeps your body used to movement, your mind engaged, and your health in check. It's what prevents those days from slipping into weeks where you don't really feel like yourself. And if you're not careful, this kind of aimless living can start to wear you down in ways you don't notice until it's too late. That's why you need a plan. Not just for your chores, but for your mind, your body, your well-being. Every single day should have a purpose, even if it's something small. A short walk, a check-in with a friend, reading a chapter of a book, cooking a proper meal instead of just snacking on whatever's easy. You don't have to fill every moment with something grand, but you do need to keep yourself engaged, moving, and aware of how you're spending your time. Because once you lose your structure, it becomes harder and harder to get it back. And speaking of structure, let's talk about something else that can quietly make life harder when you live alone: clutter. Now, I know what you might be thinking. My home is just fine the way it is. And maybe it is, But let me ask you, when was the last time you really looked at the things around you? Over the years, we collect things. A lot of things. Some of them hold memories. Some of them feel too useful to get rid of, and some of them, well, they just pile up. And before we know it, our space is filled with things we don't need, things we haven't touched in years, things that make it harder to move around, harder to clean, harder to live in comfortably. I've seen this so many times. Homes that slowly become difficult to navigate because of too much furniture. Old papers stacked up in corners, shelves filled with things that haven't been touched in decades. And at first, it's not a problem. But then one day, you trip over something that shouldn't have been there. Or you need to find an important document and spend hours digging through drawers. Or worse, you realize that your space no longer feels like a place of peace. It just feels overwhelming. The truth is, clutter isn't just about mess. It's about safety. It's about making sure your home is easy to live in, easy to move through, easy to keep clean. It's about knowing that if something ever happens, if you need to get to a phone quickly, if you need to move without obstacles, you're not struggling just because there's too much stuff in the way. So here's what I want you to do. Take a walk through your home, not as the person who's lived there for years, but as a stranger seeing it for the first time. Ask yourself, do I really need all of this? Is there anything here that makes my life harder instead of easier? And most importantly, if an emergency happened right now, could I move quickly and safely through this space? If the answer isn't a strong yes, it's time to start letting things go. And while we're on the topic of making things easier for yourself, let's talk about something that's often overlooked: emergency planning. Now, I know this isn't the most exciting thing to think about, but let's be honest. When you live alone, you don't have the luxury of assuming someone else will handle things if something goes wrong. And yet, so many people put off the most basic safety measures. They don't have a list of emergency contacts in an easy-to-find place. They haven't shared a spare key with a trusted neighbor or family member. They don't keep a simple medical history note on their fridge in case paramedics ever need it. These are small things, but they can make the difference between getting help quickly and struggling alone when you need it most. And listen, having a plan doesn't mean you're expecting something bad to happen. It just means you're prepared if it does. You don't wait until your house is on fire to buy a fire extinguisher, do you? You don't wait until your car breaks down to think about getting it serviced. This is no different. So ask yourself, if something happened to you today, who would know? Who would check on you? Who has access to your home in case of an emergency? If you can't answer those questions clearly, then it's time to change that. Because the truth is, living alone isn't just about enjoying your independence. It's about protecting it. And the best way to do that is to take the small, practical steps that make life easier, safer, and more manageable. Now, we've covered a lot so far. Staying connected, keeping a structured routine, avoiding clutter, making emergency plans. There's something people don't talk about enough when it comes to living alone. It's not about safety or finances or even daily routines. Though those things are important, it's about the way your mind changes when you spend too much time by yourself. I want you to think about this for a moment. Have you ever caught yourself going an entire day without saying a single word out loud? Have you ever realized that the only voice in your life for hours, maybe even days, has been your own thoughts? If you've been living alone for a while, you know exactly what I mean. The silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's heavy. Sometimes it plays tricks on you. You see, when you're alone for too long, your mind starts filling in the gaps. And if you're not careful, Those gaps can be filled with the wrong things: worry, doubt, overthinking, even fear. It starts small. You begin second-guessing yourself. Did I lock the door? Did I turn off the stove? Did I pay that bill? Then the isolation adds another layer. You start imagining things. What if something happens to me and no one knows? What if I get sick and no one finds me for days? And before you know it, your own home, the place that should feel safe and comfortable, starts feeling a little different, a little less like a home, a little more like a place where anything could go wrong. I don't want that for you. Because the truth is, our mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy when we're alone. And if we don't actively take care of it, loneliness can start shaping our thoughts in ways we don't even notice. That's why the next thing you need to avoid is feeding into fear and isolation. You have to recognize when your thoughts are playing tricks on you and take control before they turn into something bigger. It's easy to let small worries spiral when you have no one around to talk them through. That's why you have to stay connected to the outside world. Even if you're an introvert, even if you enjoy solitude, even if you feel like you're fine, you still need interaction. Because without it, the walls start closing in. Now, I'm not saying you need to be out and about every day. But you do need to make sure you're having real conversations, real human connection, on a regular basis. A call with a friend, a casual chat with a neighbor, even a quick interaction at the store. These things matter more than you realize. They keep your mind from getting stuck in loops of loneliness and worry. And speaking of keeping your mind healthy, there's another mistake people make when they live alone. They stop learning. Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm too old for all that learning nonsense. But let me tell you something. Your brain doesn't care how old you are. It needs to be challenged. It needs new things to chew on. And if you don't give it something, it starts to slow down. You ever notice how some older folks seem sharp as ever, while others start forgetting things, losing track of time, struggling to keep up with conversations? That's not just luck. That's mental exercise. The people who keep their minds engaged, who keep learning new things, who stay curious, those are the ones who stay sharp well into their later years. And no, I'm not talking about going back to school or studying something complicated. I mean simple things. Read a book. Learn how to use a new gadget. Try a new hobby. Even if you're not great at it, keep your brain working, keep it moving, keep it engaged. Because once you stop learning, your mind starts shutting doors that might never open again. Now, I want to talk about something that might be uncomfortable. But it's important. When you live alone, it's easy to slip into unhealthy habits. And one of the biggest ones, poor eating habits. I see it all the time. People who used to cook real meals for themselves start skipping it because it's too much trouble. They eat whatever's easiest, which usually means processed foods, snacks, or nothing at all. They stop thinking of meals as important, and before they know it, their nutrition suffers, their energy drops, and their body starts feeling the effects. Food isn't just about eating. It's fuel. It's medicine. And when you live alone, you have to make sure you're feeding yourself properly, not just grabbing whatever's fast or convenient. Because the moment you stop caring about what goes into your body stops performing the way it should. And here's the hard truth. When you're older, bad nutrition doesn't just make you feel sluggish. It weakens your immune system. It affects your mood. It makes injuries harder to heal. It speeds up aging in ways you don't notice until it's too late. That's why you have to be intentional about what you eat. And I know, cooking for one isn't as fun as cooking for a family. It can feel like too much effort for just yourself. But listen to me. You are worth the effort. Your body deserves real nutritious food. And the act of preparing a meal, sitting down to eat it properly, even if it's just you, there's something powerful in that. It reminds you that you matter, that you deserve care, even if it's coming from your own hands. Now, I want to leave you with one last thought before we move on to the final section. When you live alone, you have a choice. You can either let life happen to you, or you can take control of it. Too many people spend their later years in a state of waiting for someone to visit, waiting for something interesting to happen, waiting for time to pass. But here's the thing, time is going to pass no matter what. The question is, how are you spending it? Are you actively creating a life you enjoy? Are you doing things that make you feel alive? Or are you just drifting day by day, waiting for something to change? Because I'll tell you this, nothing changes unless you make it change. If you want to feel better, move more. If you want to feel less lonely, reach out to people. If you want to stay sharp, challenge your mind. If you want a fulfilling life, you have to build it yourself. No one is coming to save you from boredom, from loneliness, from unhealthy habits. No one is going to fix your life for you. You have to do that yourself. And the good news? You can. Right now. Today. One decision at a time.